Every spring, Americans dig up and spray the same yellow flower George Washington Carver once praised as food. In 1942, he called the common dandelion very tender and delicious. Just 5 years later, Scots told homeowners to banish it. The plant had not changed, the yard had. So how did a useful food become public lawn enemy number one? The answer lies in status, suburbia, and the rise of chemical lawn care. Long before Americans fought dandelions, people gave them names that described what they saw. The English word came through the French dent de lion, or lion's tooth, for the jagged edges of the leaves. Old herbals recorded roots, leaves, and flowers in household practice. Many medical claims from those books were never tested by modern standards. The food use is much easier to document. In early spring, when stored vegetables were tired and gardens had barely started, the dandelion offered fresh leaves close to the kitchen door. Young greens could be eaten raw or cooked. Older leaves became more bitter, but boiling strong dressings and mixing them with other greens made that bitterness manageable. Roots were dried and roasted for a coffee-like drink. Flowers entered wines and preserves. European settlers carried these habits into North America, where dandelions spread through disturbed ground around farms, roads, and settlements. Rural families continued gathering them as spring greens. In parts of Appalachia, that first mess of bitter greens belonged to the seasonal idea of a spring tonic. Not a miracle cure, but food that arrived when winter diets had become repetitive. The plant also entered commerce. In 1886, agricultural historian E. Louis Sturtevant reported that a grower in Brookline, Massachusetts, had raised dandelions for the Boston market as early as 1836. He found dandelion seed in American catalogs by 1874, and 6 named offerings in catalogs from 1885. Protected growth and rich soil produced larger, more succulent leaves. This was not merely desperate foraging. Gardeners were selecting and cultivating a vegetable. Dandelion never rivaled corn, wheat, or potatoes. It was not a great lost calorie staple. Its value was smaller and more intimate. It appeared early, grew freely, returned after cutting, and required knowledge more than money. How many times have you walked across that food without recognizing it? The easy explanation for the dandelion's fall is that the plant is simply too aggressive. There is truth in that. A common dandelion grows its leaves in a low rosette, often beneath the mower blade. Its taproot commonly reaches 6 to 18 inches into the soil, sometimes deeper. Leave enough root behind and the plant can return. One plant can produce thousands of wind-carried seeds, and exposed soil gives new seedlings an opening. It is almost perfectly equipped for a landscape that is cut, disturbed, and repeatedly cleared. That makes dandelions difficult to manage. It does not explain why a yellow flower became a moral failure. A weed is not a botanical family. It is a plant judged to be in the wrong place. The same dandelion can be a crop in a market garden, a spring green beside a farmhouse, a colonizer in a protected landscape, and a weed in turf. The biology stays recognizable. The human rule changes. That ambiguity appears inside the historical record. In 1886, Sturtevant described dandelion as both a weed in gardens and a cultivated vegetable raised for market. That was not a contradiction. It was the entire relationship in miniature. A plant became a weed when it conflicted with the owner's plan. What the modern lawn did was standardize one plan across an enormous landscape. For much of European history, an expanse of closely managed grass advertised wealth. Productive land usually grew food or supported animals. Land maintained mainly as a green carpet announced that its owner could spare both acreage and labor. That landscape ideal crossed the Atlantic. In 1868, Frederick Law Olmsted's plan for Riverside, Illinois, set houses back from the road behind open lawns. Later suburbs repeated the arrangement. After World War II, mass home ownership helped turn what had once framed estates into the public face of an ordinary house. The front yard was private property, but it was also a neighborhood display. Height, color, and texture became signals of care. Grass was expected to look continuous. A dandelion did not need to damage the house or poison the soil. It only needed to be different. The scale became enormous. The 2005 satellite-based estimate placed American turf at roughly 128,000 square kilometers, about 31.6 million acres, and approximately 3 times the area of irrigated corn. That estimate included residential and commercial lawns, parks, golf courses, and other turf, so it was not a census of front yards, but it revealed the size of the habit. This is the central fact. Dandelions did not become lawn enemies because they became useless. Uniform turf created a new definition of usefulness, and the yellow broadleaf became the perfect visible violation. The lawn did not reveal what the dandelion was. It decided where the dandelion no longer belonged. A standard is only an aspiration until someone can enforce it efficiently. Before modern herbicides, removing dandelions meant cutting flower heads, improving turf, or digging roots one by one. The work could succeed, but the plant's deep root and low leaves made it stubborn. Then, a new class of selective chemistry arrived. By the 1940s, 2,4-D could control many broadleaf plants, while established grasses often survived when the product was used as directed. That distinction changed lawn care. Instead of kneeling beside each rosette, a homeowner could treat a much larger grassy area. The desired plant and the condemned plant could occupy the same square foot, yet receive different fates from the same application. The chemistry did not secretly invent the lawn. The lawn did not suddenly appear because a chemical company ordered it into existence. The transformation was more powerful because no single conspiracy was required. An old status symbol, a suburban building boom, a culture of neighborhood conformity, and a scalable product all reinforced one another. The advertising makes that alignment visible. On May 1, 1947, an ad in the Newton Graphic offered a 3-part lawn program: feed, seed, and weed. Feed the grass. Add more grass where the surface was thin. Then call on weed control to banish dandelions. The promise was quick destruction of the weeds without damage to the grass. Notice what the customer was buying. It was not merely a bottle or a bag. It was a definition of completion. Grass belonged. Broadleaves did not. Any yellow flower remaining after treatment announced unfinished work. Marketing did not create every dislike of dandelions. Farmers and gardeners had called them weeds before the post-war suburb. But selective herbicides made a nearly weed-free lawn attainable across millions of ordinary properties. Once perfection could be purchased, imperfection became harder to excuse. In some places, the preference even entered law. The city of Casper, Wyoming, currently tells property owners to keep lots and adjoining areas free from all dandelions, with notice, mowing charges, or court action available for non-compliance. That is one municipal example, not a national rule. Yet it shows how a plant preference can become a civic obligation. The dandelion was biologically persistent, visually obvious, and chemically vulnerable. For the modern lawn, it was the perfect enemy. What disappeared with the plant was not a secret superfood. It was a modest piece of household competence. In February 1942, an Alabama newspaper ran an article with a blunt wartime message. If war caused a shortage of green vegetables, weeds were good to eat. Letters arrived asking for more information. George Washington Carver saw a practical need, and answered it through the Agricultural Research and Experiment Station at Tuskegee Institute. His bulletin, Nature's Garden for Victory and Peace, did not begin with a fantasy about living entirely from the roadside. It organized familiar wild plants into food groups and explained how households already cooked related vegetables. The ordinary dandelion came first. Carver described the plant of the dooryard, field, and roadside, the one readers already knew. On February 20th, he wrote, "It was tender." He recommended the leaves as greens prepared like turnips or collards, as a spinach-style dish with hard-boiled eggs, or shredded into a salad with onion, radish, parsley, and dressing. The historical moment matters. Carver was writing while families were thinking about shortages, wartime gardens, and the cost of feeding a household. A plant dismissed as common could still provide something fresh. Its value did not depend on novelty. It depended on recognition. A household did not need to accept every old remedy. It only needed to recognize the plant, gather it at a useful stage, and know how to cook it. Knowledge like that rarely vanishes in one dramatic moment. People simply stop passing it on. Earlier, growers understood another part of the method. Dandelion selected from rich ground produced larger leaves, and protected or blanched growth could yield a more delicate salad. Young leaves gathered before flowering are generally milder. As the season advances, bitterness rises. Cooking or pairing the leaves with acid, fat, or other strong flavors changes the experience. That knowledge is practical, but it is not permission to eat the first yellow rosette beside a parking lot. Common dandelion belongs to a complicated group, and several yellow-flowered plants can look similar to an untrained eye. Confirm identification with a qualified local source. Never gather from a lawn that may have been sprayed beside a busy road where pets regularly visit or anywhere contamination is uncertain. Get the landowner's permission and follow local rules. The National Institutes of Health says dandelion in ordinary food amounts is likely safe, but that is not the same as taking concentrated extracts. There is no compelling evidence that dandelion treats a health condition. Allergic reactions are possible, and supplements may interact with medications. Food history should recover knowledge, not manufacture a cure. The simplest return is also the safest. Buy cultivated dandelion greens from a reputable grower. Or create a known, pesticide-free patch where identification and land history are certain. An honest history must make room for the strongest objection. Dandelions really can be weeds. Common dandelion is introduced across much of North America. It colonizes disturbed ground, competes where managers are protecting other plants, and spreads easily. In a vegetable bed, pasture, restoration site, or carefully maintained lawn, removal can be reasonable. People did not invent its taproot, its seed, or its ability to return. The pollinator story also needs restraint. Dandelions can offer early pollen and nectar when little else is flowering, and many insects visit them. But Oregon State University describes them as more like a snack than a complete meal. Diverse native flowers generally provide better habitat. Saving pollinators requires more than refusing to mow one imported flower. So the choice is not between poisoning every dandelion and surrendering every yard to them. Context matters. A homeowner might keep a small untreated harvest patch, buy cultivated greens, replace part of a lawn with regionally appropriate plants, or simply tolerate a few flowers where spread is not a conservation problem. Another person may remove them to protect a crop or meet a local requirement. If pesticides are used, the label and protective directions matter. Treated plants must never become food. The practical return is not dandelion worship, it is the recovery of judgment. We can recognize that a plant may be food in one place and a weed in another. We can ask whether blanket control is solving actual harm or merely preserving an inherited appearance. And we can remember that perfect landscapes are not discovered in nature. They are designed, taught, purchased, and enforced. That distinction does not weaken the central thesis, it sharpens it. Lawn culture did not create every reason to control dandelions. It selected one side of the plant's identity, enlarged it across millions of acres, and helped us forget the rest. Now return to that first yellow flower in the lawn. The taproot is the same kind people once dug for household use. The leaves are close relatives of those sold in market gardens and described by Carver during wartime. The seed head is still built to cross a property line without asking permission. The plant can still be troublesome, but it is not only troublesome. The dandelion did not become more useless when lawn products arrived in the 1940s. Americans became less willing to see anything in the yard except grass. Food became a flaw. Seasonal knowledge became neglect. A living yellow flower became evidence that somebody had failed to finish the job. The lawn did not reveal what the dandelion was. It decided where the dandelion no longer belonged. You do not have to eat it. You do not have to let it spread. But once you know its history, you can make that choice with more than one story in your head. And the next time a dandelion rises through a green lawn, it may look less like an enemy and more like a question the landscape was designed to hide. When a dandelion appears in a lawn, do you see a weed that should be removed, or food our idea of a perfect yard taught us to forget? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe to Forgotten Crop for more food history buried beneath our feet.